Dolores Kelly, Chair of the Employment and Learning Committee. Mrs Kelly.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I will begin by making some remarks of concern in relation to the concerns that the committee has in relation to this budget, and then finish with some personal remarks from my own party perspective. Mr Speaker, the committee intends over the course of the next 2 weeks to hold a special meeting to discuss the implications of the budget on the DEL department. As many members will know, the recession has not yet ended here in the north. This budget, unfortunately, with the cuts that are imposed, there will be consequences of further job losses and constraints on DEL. And as many members will know, there are inescapable pressures on DEL, because DEL has to provide the employability skills training and job skills steps to work programmes, and it's inevitable that there will be more people actually requiring that assistance. But one of the biggest concerns for many members of the committee is in fact the increase in tuition fees and how higher education in particular is being targeted. Some £40 million is being taken from that element of the budget. I think it's also true to say that members of the committee are concerned that the department itself does not appear to be making any savings until the final year of this budget cycle. And that is a concern, because we think that the department should be leading by example in some regard. In relation to tuition fees in particular, the committee will be later this week hearing from Professor Gregson from Queen's University and also students, presidents from the various student unions, because we want to ensure that education remains on the basis of ability to learn and not the ability to pay. And many members will rightly be proud of Northern Ireland's record in widening access and participation amongst all community background socio-economic groups. That is something that we wish to maintain, and are anxious that this budget will impact on that element. We also are concerned in relation to the number of people who have lost their jobs and will require assistance from the colleges in terms of retraining and furthering their own educational needs. And looking, yes, sir, we'll give a.
Could the member tell us what's in this budget for the 250,000 people in the north who cannot read or write, cannot put their qualifications on a CV because they don't have any? Those are the people who are promised equality under the Good Friday Agreement. What's in this budget for those people who are now unemployed and have no qualification?
I welcome the member's intervention. In fact, last week, when the officials from the DEL department appeared before the committee, we asked them that particular question in terms of the impact of essential skills training has to be paid for and picked up by DEL. So a failure at education level is then being picked up later at DEL, and really what we want to do is to get it right first time. And also, as some of my colleagues commented earlier, that there needs to be much stronger investment in early years training, because we all know below the age of 7 is the prime time for children actually to learn, ability to learn. Mr Speaker, if I might move on to my own particular and party concerns. And I've listened carefully to what many members have had to say when they have attacked the SDLP. It's quite clear, Mr Speaker, that they didn't listen to what the party leader, Margaret Ritchie, outlined in her opening comments in speaking to the amendment. As Mr Speaker, you may now be aware, the Business Office and I think the ruling, in fact, this is the only way in which, and the only opportunity in which any party in this chamber actually has any influence on having any amendments made to this budget. And some members commented on the amounts of money that the party was suggesting should be surrendered at this stage, but this is just an example. And some members tried to score petty points by saying that, I think it was Mr O'Dowd saying that our party only produced its document on the eve of the budget. Well, you know, some members find it very strange, mind you, that Mr O'Dowd in Upper Bann is actually dropping leaflets around people's doors saying no to Tory cuts, and a big picture of him beside a particular budget. Whenever he let the cat...
Allow the member to continue order.
Out of the bag, Mr. Speaker, today, and on Nolan within the last 2 weeks, when he said that they're now having to mitigate that, in fact, the only way that he could actually do was to actually collapse the institutions. That's the alternative. But why isn't he telling the people that whenever he's throwing the leaflet in and saying no to Tory cuts? You know, there is an old adage that says you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all of the time. All of the time. Well,
Order. Remarks through the chair. Order.
So, Mr. There's some interference in my ear. I'm not really sure what it is, but anyway, there's a lot of whinging. That's what it sounds very like to me. But, Mr. Speaker, the other elements.
Will the member give way?
Yes, I will indeed.
Did I hear the member correctly that they're dropping leaflets to say stop the cuts that they're implementing?
Yes, indeed. It's a big picture, actually, of Mr. O'Dowd beside a huge poster saying no to Tory cuts. You know, it's a bit like, do you know what it'll be like, members? It'll be like the posters that members recall about saying no to water charges. Those posters and billboards mysteriously disappeared practically overnight a couple of years ago, whenever Sinn Féin removed them. So I suspect that this particular one will actually will disappear also and be part of the selective memory. But of course we all know that Sinn Féin's trying to fight an election in the south of Ireland by saying no to cuts and burning up the bondholders and all sorts of things. But this budget, back to this budget, Mr. Speaker, this budget, according to the Queen's University produced an excellent paper last week which raised many concerns on social policy. This budget actually will affect and impact more adversely on women than any other. The budget also has the welfare reforms stand to lose over £600 million per year, year on year, right through to 2015. The discrepancies that is contained within the budget, because I'm sure as the Finance Minister will address the issue about the inflation rate. When the budget was set, they talked about inflation around 2 or 3%, where economists are now predicting a 5% inflation rate by the end of the year, and that will have an also adverse impact. Whilst members talk about no compulsory redundancies and no job losses, we all know that many posts are not being refilled. So that obviously has an impact on the availability of jobs for those who are seeking employment. And that then too means that there will be less disposable income for families right across the north. So many jobs that depend upon people spending, particularly in the retail sector, stand to lose out, because people are obviously very concerned. And I wonder, unfortunately Mr Farry has left, but I wonder, does the Alliance Party concur with their colleague Seamus Close, who called it a daft policy on BBC Radio Ulster only yesterday? He said it was a daft policy. And you know, there is this consensus around Sinn Féin DUP alliance, consensus around the budget and many other decisions, if one were to a very cosy corner indeed around this budget and many other decisions of this party, of this chamber. But Mr. Speaker, the budget is one which has no programme for government, no investment strategy, and as I remarked earlier, the Minister's own department guidelines say that we should have a programme for government and investment strategy up front before we have the budget. That's best practice. It's best practice within the European Union, and yet this Assembly can't do that. And one has to wonder why. Many of my colleagues referred to the Social Investment Fund. As a slush fund, in fact, some call it, as a member of OFM-DFM committee, have asked on numerous occasions for the criteria to access that fund and the terms and conditions. I have yet to get an answer. No answer yet. And one of the main partners in this budget likes to describe itself as a party of equality. There is no equality in this budget. It does not look after the most vulnerable, it does not look after the most disadvantaged in society, but looks after party political interests, and shame on them all, Mr. Speaker. Shame on them.